Hello everyone, welcome to the Investors Corner. This is part 2 of a 2-part series of questions that are being asked into Google. Thousands of questions in the UK asked into Google. You can pick this episode up right now, even if you haven't listened to part 1, and then go back and listen to part 1. So no need to jump off straight away because there is no order between the questions. But we're going to cover question 8 all the way through to 14 on this particular episode. How are you, Andy?
Yeah, I'm good.
Ready for
Always
the second
good.
part?
Dangerously well.
Dangerously, I like that. Yeah, I like that. Dangerously well. Sun shining outside. So yeah, let's get stuck into these. So it was really good part 1 because we covered in detail a lot of really interesting things, you know, pets and mold and credit scores and stuff like that. We're going to kick this one off, which is where do landlords keep deposits? So interesting one that people are asking is what actually happens to the tenant's deposit?
Yeah, I mean, with tenancy deposits, obviously you've got a maximum of 5 weeks that you can take, or it's 6 weeks if it's above £50,000 a year.
Break that down, sorry, for people that don't understand. 5 weeks of what?
5 weeks of rent.
Of the rent.
Yeah, so 5 weeks of the rent, or 6 weeks, like I said, if it's above £50,000 per annum. Now, with deposits, it needs to be in a government-approved scheme. Now, you've got 3 main deposit regulation companies out there. Okay. So first one is the TDS,
yep.
So tenancy
deposit scheme.
You've got the DPS, deposit protection service, or you've got my deposits. Okay, so they're the 3 main ones.
There is others, but they're the main.
There are others, but those are the three main ones that have been around for a while.
Yeah.
So with this, you'll register the deposit with one of those schemes, so it's protected. Okay, and then you've got to send the prescribed information and the deposit certificate to a tenant within 30 days of receiving the actual deposit. Now, a lot of landlords fall short on this because what they don't tend to do is register it within that time frame.
Okay.
And it's a strict time frame.
So they hold on to it in their own bank account for too long.
They'll hold on to it and they'll register it in 2 months' time and then send the details out to a tenant. But you have to get that information to a tenant. And if you don't, then potentially the tenant can claim up to 3 times the amount of that deposit.
If you miss the timescale.
If you miss the timescale.
Wow.
So it's a lot of money you're talking about.
Yeah.
So what a lot of landlords out there do is obviously either use some type of service with a letting agent where they will register the deposit, so they're responsible in that regard. So that takes away the responsibility from the landlord.
So talk me through your team then. So Avocado Property rented a property for the landlord, found a tenant. We're in this process. Tenant transfers those 5 weeks of rent over to the Avocado bank account. What happens for your process with your team?
So we use the DPS, Deposit Protection Service, to register the deposit. So as soon as that money comes in, then we will register that deposit straight away, regardless of when the tenancy is moving in. Mm-hmm. You know, we was probably within 24 hours, we will register that deposit. So it's all secured. It's done straight away. It's not left in the account, or we don't diarise it to register it. Mm-hmm. It's just register it straight away. We serve the documents to the tenant at that point, so they already have that information, and then we know that it's protected. The tenants will get a login to see that it's protected, and then when the tenants move in, we serve all of that relevant information again, so they've got it again. Every renewal, we serve it again. So that's the process. Mm-hmm. It comes in straight away, register it, and then the documentation sent out following that.
Simple.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people, like we just said, that keep it held in their bank account and wait for the tenancy to start and register it at that point. But they could have received that money 45 days ago.
Yeah.
And not done anything with it.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people are trying to rent properties, 2 months before they become available, effectively.
Yeah,
aren't they?
exactly.
So it's probably something easily done.
It's an easy mistake to make. I get it. But yeah, it's just keep in mind that, look, if you get that money, just do it straight away. You don't need to wait for the tenancy to start. Yeah. You can do it straight away. You know it's sorted. Tenants have got the information. You've served all that. You don't need to worry about it. Yeah. And like I said, if you miss it, potential claim there up to 3 times the amount.
And your £11.24p that you're making on interest is not worth the 3-month fine.
No.
or the 3 times fine, I should say. Yeah.
Definitely not.
This is a question which we won't dwell on this particular episode because we've covered this on quite a few, so listen back to them. But why are landlords selling up? I think what's probably the best way to answer this question is maybe to summarise it in the 3 top reasons that we experience. I mean, for me as an agent, talking to landlords that are selling, the general theme that I've found over the last 5, 6, 7 years, let's ignore the COVID scenario in that timescale, is just the fact that we've got a very dominant retirement age in the country now. I think we recently did an episode where we spoke about the fact that there's more 60-year-olds in the UK than 18-year-olds for the first time statistically in history, which is quite interesting. And also a lot of those retirement level people have had buy-to-lets and they're now looking to cash in on them. They've made a lot of money on them and they're looking to sell. I'd say that's in the top 3, if not the number 1 reason why.
Absolutely.
What else are you experiencing? People moving abroad, you were seeing a little bit, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, look, we say that landlords are selling up, but if you look at the statistics and the data that I use is 20-year data. Mm-hmm. Okay, if I go back to January 24 to July 24, there was 613,000 properties new instructions that were put on the market. If you look at 1st of January 25 to now, there's 616,000.
Mm-hmm. So it's gone up 3,000.
It's gone up.
Mm-hmm.
If you take and that's across the UK. If we take the Southeast, for example, it was 82,000 for the same time period in 24. But in 25, we're at 85,000. Okay, so we say landlords are selling up, but they're still coming in. There's still higher instructions that are coming to the market, and yes, you will have those people at retirement age that their long-term goal was for their pension pot, where they bought a property and now they're looking to exit and use that equity to go and do what they want. But even with the people that are moving overseas, and I've probably had 5 properties in the last 3 weeks where they've moved overseas and are renting their property out. Yep. They're not necessarily going to sell their family home in the UK because they're moving overseas. They want a base, don't they? They need that base. If they go overseas for work, or let's say they go to Dubai and, heard great things about it and they want to go and do that for 2 years and it doesn't work out, well, they've got nowhere to come back to in the UK. So I think where... we talk about those people, I don't think they're necessarily selling. They're more than likely going to go renting and keep hold of their asset in the UK, go and test the waters overseas. And, in 4 years' time, when they think it's the right move for them, then they may sell at that point.
I think it's a fair point as well that maybe inside that top 3, some of the people that are selling up are because they've got rental properties that aren't HMOs, standard buy-to-lets, and they're kind of doing it with a basis of it makes them, the phrase in the training courses at Heathrow at the back of the room would be financially free. But what they're effectively trying to do is make a monthly living out of raising finance, buying a property, and then having the tenant pay the mortgage and effectively pay for your full-time role or your part-time role. That's become a little bit more difficult recently than it has done previously with interest rate climbs. Although the landlord rates, the buy-to-let rates are pretty strong out there at the moment in comparison to the resis. Yeah. Some of those from what Tom at Mortgage Tribe was saying to me the other day are now starting to return, isn't it? Yeah, which is really nice to see. But some people with the compliance, with the risk, with the renters reform bill that's imminent, we keep saying. That's where the challenge may be with some of those. And we don't need to dwell on that because people know that if they are there. But that's probably why people are typing that in, is they want to know. But then much like, the person that's coming in to meet with you in a minute, it's a different scenario. They've got some extra cash and they're looking at being... in their 30s, 40s, looking at it as a long-term project. A lot of people, I think, are trying to buy properties and rent them out with their children in mind, because they know if you can afford to do it, especially around the Southeast, if you can afford to do it, that if you've got the money, okay, I'm going to try and make it easier for my child to get on the property ladder by taking the initiative myself, because we've seen in our generation, the last 20 years, what property prices have done. There's no reason why that won't happen again. So, for the likes of, for me, Grace and Lily, for you, Poppy, that's something to consider. So that's one of the reasons. This is an interesting one. Why landlords require renters insurance?
Yeah, I mean, this renters insurance has sort of boomed over the last, let's say, 24 months. And the reason for that is because we've seen that there's bigger court delays with if you need to get your property back. We've seen that, tenants' situations have changed where they can no longer necessarily to afford to pay the rent. And with the insurance in place, well, you get your rent paid on a monthly basis if there's arrears. Mm-hmm. You get your legal expenses covered, normally up to 100 grand. You don't have to pay any excess on the insurance. And this is just one specific insurance policy that we deal with. There's many out there, so they may be different. But you also get a post-vacancy rent paid as well, up to 6 weeks. So to have that insurance in place, well, it's peace of mind that if anything went wrong through the tenancy, all your costs are covered. Your income's covered. Mm-hmm. Your legal costs are covered. You also get a percentage of the rent after the tenant vacates, because more than likely you're not going to be able to market the property whilst the tenant's still there, because they won't allow access. So really having that cover in place, it's just security for a landlord.
No-brainer, really.
And it wasn't something that was really talked about a few years ago. But like I said, with everything being delayed in the courts and more tenants out there struggling and all of that sort of stuff, it's really come into play. For most of my clients, they sign up automatically. I don't even need to have a conversation. I explain what it is, and they're, I want that. Yeah. That's the whole point of the insurance. It protects you, protects your investment, protects your income. So it's a bit of a no-brainer not to have it, really.
Well, you get car insurance, you get housing insurance. If you're going on a big holiday trip, you cover your travel. I do a lot of running races. They even offer insurance, in case you get injured for a running race, because most of them cost 250 quid these days to enter. So you pay £8 for some sort of insurance to get your money back if you need to defer. There's a lot of that out there to secure people. And when you're talking tenancy, absolutely, why wouldn't you?
Exactly. And you'll get people out there that don't feel like they need the insurance, but it comes down to the fact that, okay, if your tenant didn't pay rent and your rent was £1,000 a month, knowing that the average court time at the moment is 12 months, then can you afford to lose out on £12,000 over a year of rent? Yeah. Can you afford to pay the legal cover for, which is probably going to cost you, I don't know, 2.5-3 grand? Can you afford to pay that amount to a solicitor and again lose out on that? Because even if the judge gives you possession and you're trying to claim costs back, more than likely the tenant won't pay it, and then you need to try and go through money claims and all of that sort of stuff.
Even if you can afford it, you sort of don't need to, just pay a small amount.
Why would you risk it?
Yeah, the rent, just add it into the rent and the P&L sheet, that you've got, and don't risk it, because it's a lump sum, even if you can afford it, that you don't need to shell out if you've got the cover. So, no brainer. That answers that question. This is a funny one. In part one, if you haven't heard part one, can landlords refuse pets was a question. This one is why landlords don't want children. Now, I don't think it means they don't want to have children themselves. Yeah. They don't want children in their rental properties. Yeah. It feels like a bit of an archaic question, this one, actually, but it's obviously still being asked into Google quite frequently. So
yeah, I mean, some people have this perception that if you've got children in a property, they're going to ruin the property. They're going to draw on all of the walls. They're going to cause a mess. It's not going to be looked after. They're going to be spilling stuff on the carpets and all of that sort of stuff. And look, sometimes that happens, but it's just one of those that it's again dependent on the property. My conversation to landlords is it's a family home, so you can't expect people to live in your property that don't have kids. It's not going to work. Younger kids, older kids, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, if you're worried about the damage that they're causing, well, you've got the security deposit there anyway. So if any damage is caused, you can use that to fix it. If you have a managing agent, they do property inspections anyway, or should do property inspections. So they'll be visiting the property, and if they notice any damage has been caused, they'll have a quiet word with the tenants there and then, and sort it out. From a noise perspective, they may be noisy, but we were kids once, and I'm sure we were noisy at any one time. So really, landlords that say that they don't want children, after having a conversation with them, it changes. It changes.
Yeah, it's not an Airbnb.
No.
It's one of those things that I don't think there's many out there that are still thinking that way. I mean, look, in one of my properties, they had a 4-year-old that was in the property over lockdown, and the property visit that was happened, a couple of months after we were sort of back open in the normal world. The property visit showed that 4-year-old had literally drawn over every piece of woodwork, walls, doors, everything. And I just had a conversation with the tenant and just said, look, I understand it's difficult. Like, we just had lockdown, and these things happen, but we agreed, that it would be restored back to its original state. And in the end, they stayed there for another 2 or 3 years, and they didn't want to live with all of the drawing all over. So they just had it decorated. Yeah. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, all right, well, it's been freshly decorated. They moved out 9 months later and it looked tip top, but if you could have been horrified by some of the midterm inspection photos. And she wasn't Banksy, let's put it that way. So, it was pretty shocking. But it doesn't put you off having kids in there, because those particular tenants stayed in that property for like 7 years, and they were good tenants. So, it's one of those things. Who do landlords work with for evictions?
So, I mean, it's going to be solicitors and agents for the evictions. And the reason for that is you're going to work with an agent, obviously, if they manage your property, because if you need to evict a tenant, then more than likely you've got to have a trail of what issues have occurred at that property. If it's rental arrears, then you've got the rent logbook on through the agent side, where you'll need to send a rent schedule off to courts and to solicitors. So there's one involvement there, and more than likely your agent's going to be serving the Section 21 notice or Section 8 notice as well. So you've got to deal with them as part of the eviction process. And the whole point of having a solicitor there is so they can ensure that everything is done correctly. Yeah. Because one mistake, the thing with rental and taking the eviction process is that we all know that the courts or judges are very much one-sided when it comes to the tenant and landlord. Okay, if they can favour in the tenant's way, they will do it. Yeah, especially on a discretionary ground. Yeah. Right. So any one mistake, and look, I know of a case recently where the Section 21 notice had been served to the tenant. The landlord had insurance on it. The documents were served to the tenant, but unfortunately the insurers came back and said, well, looking at the gas safety certificate, it wasn't fully filled in correctly with the landlord's name. And judges have ruled in favour of a tenant because a name was missed off the gas safety. Wow. So that just highlights very much tenant-sided.
How important it is. Yeah.
So if you try and do things yourself and you miss one thing, the judge will notice it and they'll use it. Okay. As in, if you use a solicitor, well, they're going to make sure everything's covered. Yeah. Because if they don't cover everything and they make a mistake, well, they're pretty much in trouble with that client, right? Yeah. Because they're the ones that have caused that mistake. So always work with a solicitor, work with an agent if you've got one. Don't try and do it yourself just to try and save some money, because you'll end up paying more in the long run.
I remember Mike shared a story on this where a landlord did try and do it themselves. They were pushing the boundary, and it just fell flat on their face and ended up costing them more money. So it's important to deal with the professionals. We've got 2 questions left.
Right.
Okay, and the penultimate one. Do the council have a list of private landlords? What a random question.
That's a random question.
Multiple people tapping into
Google. I feel
like
the landlords are trying to hide themselves.
Or is it a load of estate agents trying to get a list?
Could be. I mean, no, the council don't have a specific list of landlords. I mean, they could potentially find landlords by looking at what properties are up for rent on Rightmove, Zoopla, or other portals. But there's no specific list. Now that will change when the Renters' Rights Bill comes in, because part of that process will be that the landlords have to sign up to a landlord database. If they don't, they're going to get fined. Mm-hmm. If an agent rents out a property on behalf of a landlord, they need to ensure that the landlord is on this system. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they've set this up is because there's no current list, but there will be a list.
It's crazy, really, because in other countries there just is. Like, it's just and it's such a big thing.
And I think that's something that the council should have done a long time ago. But having this new thing come in, this landlord database, well, the reason probably why it's done is for councils, for HMRC, so they can see exactly who is a landlord, and make sure that you're declaring what you should. The councils know specifically in their borough who a landlord is, how many properties are rented out, etc., because they've got no way of doing that now. They could do land registry checks. They can compare that against their council tax, know, who's paying the council tax. A lot of manual work for them. Haven't got the resources to do it, hence why they don't do it. But having this list in this new database, it's obviously easy access for them, right? So, no current list at the moment, but
there will be.
But HMRC have recently been going out to agents within this area to demand a full list of who we have as landlords, their bank account details, their property address, how long we've rented the property for, what the current rent is, and obviously with them requesting this information, you have to provide it to them, right?
Yeah.
So with them requesting this, they're obviously going to get this list in place, get it all up and running, and they're going to come down hard on it because they know that they've got everything there now to go and penalise landlords that aren't doing things correctly.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
And the last question of part 2 of this 2-part series is there a rental crisis in the UK? And I don't want to dwell on this because I think this is an episode in itself that we're at the halfway point of the year.
Yeah.
And it's probably a really good episode that we can deep dive into and just almost review the last 18 months and what comes in the next 18 months. I think it's a good one for us to have a conversation around the room with maybe a mortgage advisor involved as well. Is there a rental crisis in the UK? If you were to say yes or no, which fence would you be jumping off of?
I would go no.
If I'd have asked you that question 18 months ago, would you have still said no?
I would have said yes.
Yeah, I thought I would have probably said the same thing.
Yeah, and I think the reason for no's is because, look, with the property that we're seeing come into the market, with the number being up, we've seen more first-time buyers purchase property that were renters. So those properties are now freed up for renters to go in. The only crisis I would say is to do with, I mean, crisis is a big word. I mean, it's not a crisis. It's an issue. The only issue that I think is in the rentals market is the rental pricing. Yeah, I think we're hitting the affordability level now where people can't afford those levels. And I think that may have a detrimental effect on people trying to rent and their options are limited on what they can and can't do. So that's the only issue. But with supply, demand, no, it's not a crisis.
Well, I think 18 months ago, rental prices were going up a minimum of 10% year on year. And buy-to-let rates had got to the lowest level of 5 something. Those mortgage rates are now a 2 something at their bottom end, and we're not in double figures on rental.
No, I mean, it's around 3%.
Yeah. So, we're around inflation in reality. So there was looking like a pretty severe crisis 18 months ago and a couple of years prior to that. Now it feels a bit more normal, but we do want to deep dive into that because what does that mean for landlords? What does it mean to new property investors? And how can they look at what happens over the rest of this decade from 2025 to 2030? Which, as I say, that sounds scary because I've watched movies in my younger years where they were set in the future. And the future has already happened in those movies, like Demolition Man with Wesley Snipes and things like that. So it's scary when you look at it, but I hope people have taken a lot from those 14 questions. We thought they were interesting and we haven't manipulated them or put them in any sort of order. It's just these are the phrases people are typing into Google. They want the information. We've shared our opinions on it. Don't forget to subscribe, follow the podcast. We do this because we want to give new landlords, future landlords and current landlords, just our views, opinions, get to know us if they want to work with us at Avocado Property. And hopefully people find it valuable. Share it with your friends, with other people that you know are landlords. We have all sorts of different guests on. The most recent episodes that we had was a 3-part series with an investor where you spent 2 hours with him deep diving into some really good stuff. So if you haven't checked that episode out, go back and have a look. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode.